Hello and welcome to everybody that's watching this first episode of the Dragon Riders of Osnen, episode 1 of Legends, Lore, and a wee bit more. I am the book's narrator, Andrew McDermott. My accent's a wee bit different from the normal narrator. I'm from Ireland, and opposite me is Richard Fierce, the author. Rather than me telling you loads about the book, I like asking questions and sitting back. I do enough talking as it is. So, Richard, would you tell everybody that's watching this video and wants to learn a little bit more about all the behind the scenes of Osnan and your influences, just a little bit about your influences and maybe some legends, some lore, whatever comes into your mind?
Sure. So when I first was writing the first book, I I really didn't know it was going to be a series to begin with. It was just something, I was between projects, didn't have any plans for anything. So I just started this story about a boy who, was wanted to be a dragon rider and kind of just was really pantsing the whole story. Like, there was no plot line in mind other than just this idea this guy wanted to be a dragon rider, and so that's kind of how it started. I had no idea it would be 10 books and potentially more. We'll see. But yeah, it just started as just this one book and kind of transformed into more. But my influences would be, some of the greats, R.A. Salvatore, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. And then what kind of gave me the idea for episodic stuff was, the popularity of Netflix,
Yeah.
TV shows. You put the whole series up and, people like to feel like they're getting through stuff. Like, like people like to read, but they don't have a lot of time. They don't, they don't want to spend a month reading an 800-page novel.
Yeah.
They would like to feel like they're accomplishing something by, reading a, 200-page book in, 2 days or whatever. So I was kind of had that kind of audience in mind.
Yeah.
So, so that's why they're novella length, 20 to 30,000 words each. And, it was kind of, excuse me, just started out as the one book, but as I put things into that first book, and the story kind of to take on this life of it could be more than, just this one book. There's things that come in the later books that originated from the first one.
Yes.
So the coin that, the fourth book is about and things like that. So it definitely took on a much bigger life than what I had, envisioned when I started. So
Yeah.
nice.
Tell me about the main character, Eldwin. What drew me to it when I was auditioning for it, and it wasn't just the length. I found the length fascinating, loved the covers, but your hero is different because he is not a stereotypical Hollywood hero. He has a disability. Can you go into that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how much of it I revealed in the first book, but he was injured as a child, and that's why he likes to follow the rules because he was, not necessarily rebellious, but as a child he did something he wasn't supposed to do, which resulted in his arm getting crushed. And so, as you know, Marin is not for the rules. She's rebellious. She likes to do her own thing.
Yeah.
And she's based off my wife. So my wife is stubborn and hard-headed, and that's kind of where I got the inspiration for her. And so anyways, he likes to follow the rules. He doesn't want to get in trouble. His parents are dead. His dad was given land because he was a hero of a war, but the lands are dying. There's no crops. So being a dragon rider, that's all he's got. Like he has to make it in the school and he has to stay there. Otherwise, he doesn't know what he's going to do. And so that's why he wants to make sure he doesn't get in trouble, follow the rules, and so with the disability, I wanted him to be, relatable to people, right? Because oftentimes, like you said, in Hollywood movies or whatever, the hero is like perfect, like he has no flaws, he, everything comes easy. And That's not real life. So I was thinking I would want to follow a character who has real life, flaws, real life troubles, challenges, especially with the fact that your good arm, well, if you're right-handed, I guess, your right-handed arm,
Yeah.
if how do you go through life? Like, how do you go through all these challenges? And so that's kind of what I had in mind when I created that character.
Very good. Tell me about the regions, the different regions in your book. You have diversity. Do you want to go into that and tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So the people who've only followed the YouTube videos so far will not find this out till the third one, but there are multiple schools. So Eldwin is at the Citadel, and that's kind of the main school. It's set in Osnen, but there's two other schools as well. One far on the eastern southern coast. I had a picture of the map in my head, all the way down at the south. And your pronunciation is a little bit different than what I had in mind, but I like the
Yeah.
way that you did it, so I kind of changed it to yours. So initially, it was pronounced in my mind like Taiwanese, kind
Yeah.
of like Chinese, Japanese, because that's the culture that it is, set
Reminiscent
after.
of. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, their dragons are different. They don't have wings. They're wingless dragons, but they still fly because they're powered by magic and things like that.
Mhm.
And it's really set after the Japanese culture. So, the woman's last name, it means it's Japanese. So everything that you read when you're following the characters in that setting is all Japanese names. I looked up, did research for what does this name mean. It all has symbolism and things like that. So, um, so there's that school, and then there is, uh, I'm drawing a blank on the name I picked, but it's Viking-esque is kind of the setting for that other school. It's set way up on this snowy mountain in the middle of nowhere, just this huge mountain range, and the guy who is the master of the school fancies himself as a king because of his lineage. So he has a different way that he runs his school,
Mhm.
if you want to say. And he's very overbearing. He is, kind of like how you would picture Vikings. They're big, muscular. They're all about battle, honor, glory. And so those are the three different schools that you see so far. I mean, there may be more. Who
Oh
knows?
yeah, definitely. Don't give away too much. Don't give away too
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
Now, the magic system separate from dragons. Tell us a little about the magic. How does magic work in your world? Every world's different. Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, you name it. Everybody's different. How does magic work in your world?
Yeah, so I kind of fleshed that out as I wrote because it's mainly from Eldwin's point of view. It's
Hmm.
first person, so he's telling the story through his eyes. So, and he's not magical, right? Like
Yeah.
he doesn't have magical inclination, but his sidekick Marin is a sorcerer. So he gets to see a lot of magic through her, and she explains things to him and things like that. So the magic of the world is kind of like a river. So magic is kind of like a river that flows through the world. And the people who have that inclination to feel the magic in their spirit
Hmm.
um, can use it and draw upon it for power. And that kind of takes the way the magic works takes a kind of the front seat in the later books with what they did when they come back from book 5. So
Yes.
without spoiling it for people who've not heard them yet,
Yeah.
later in the books, the way magic works has a big impact on the last 2 or 3 books. So
Yeah.
um, so there's some interesting stuff that comes about, but it's kind of like that. So um, the river, as you would call it, just kind of flows all around the world. Um, and like I said, the people who have that inclination to feel the magic
Hmm.
can use it. And dragons are very highly magical creatures, which is also part of the storyline later in the books and how it affects dragons. So um, Yeah, it's just kind of like a river that flows and people can draw on it. Not everyone has that power, but some riders, as they grow in the bond with their dragons, can learn magic.
Mhm.
In a sense, it's really that they're drawing it from the dragon. But Eldwin, for the most part, there are a few things that kind of hint at something, but for the most part, he does not get that ability. So he kind of gets frustrated by that because he thinks it would be beneficial to have magic. But that's not really what I had in store for him. So
Tell me about dragons themselves and their relationship to their riders. When I read the books, and I'm not going to give anything away, but my impression was they were almost elitist, like, not to criticize any country, but like British royalty, very elitist. I got the impression they were perfectionists, they were powerful, and tell us about them and tell us about their relationship to the riders. How does it develop? Is it cold? Is it close? Is it loving? Is it friendly? Tell people what that sort of is involved.
sure. So they are basically were kind of formed of magic at the beginning of time. So magic is a big part of their being.
Yes.
And so um, they there is some history that I don't think is really spoiling, but they kind of made an agreement with humans to give their eggs to the school,
Mm-hmm.
and they would hatch, and then they would train riders to bond with the dragons.
Yes.
And the bond is I don't I mean I've read so many books about dragon riders and bonds and things, and I wanted to do something like a little bit different, but yet keep that same general feel of like that bond you have with the dragon, and flying, and you can speak to each other telepathically and things like that. um, and so in my world, there are different kinds of bonds, but you only get to see one, and that's Eldwin's, and that's
Yes.
a bond of necessity. And that's explained in book two. So if you've already listened to that one, you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Mm.
But he wants to find a dragon and be bonded to a dragon. And in the second book, he finds one and he bonds with it out of necessity, meaning she's a prisoner. The
Yes.
people are taking her to some mysterious person,
Mm-hmm.
and he ends up befriending her, feeding her, kind of sneaking in there and talking to her when he shouldn't be in there. And then when they find out and they start to beat him, the dragon breaks out of the cage, and then they fly off, and that's kind of where their story as dragon riders starts.
Yes.
And so there are different kinds of bonds. So the one I wanted to do was that one, which is necessity. So it's stronger than maybe some of the other bonds that I never really explored, but I've got things that I in my notes and stuff. So
Yeah.
but the one of necessity would make them closer because they had to bond.
Yes.
And it's under duress. So
Mm-hmm.
there's just something about that that makes it stronger. So um, but yes, dragons are kind of stereotypical
Mm.
in my world in that they're super powerful. They're
Yeah.
very, not necessarily better than everyone, but kind of like you said, elitist. Like they're like, they know they're the top dog of the food chain pretty much. And so,
Yeah.
they don't let anyone push them around or, whatever. And that's the thing with the dragon riders is you're not their master. The riders are not masters of their dragon. They're friends, and that bond keeps them, kind of like family. So
Yeah.
it's more about a friendship and a beneficial relationship than it is a human is master over a dragon
Yeah.
or vice versa.
Very good.
So
I there's a couple of things really interested me about the series, and one of them was the relationship between Eldwin and his dragon. And obviously, people that read book one are going to see that he's introduced to Marin in the first. Whenever they get to the Citadel, and obviously there's going to be, is she the romance thing, and then you see the dragon, and there's such a close bond between them that you're almost wondering, well, hold on a minute, is there going to be any sort of love bond between them? Now, I'm not asking you to elaborate, but I think what drew me to the series was the fact that it didn't always give me what I wanted, and it did pull on my emotions. I seen Eldwin with the underdog story. He's lost his parents, he's lost his father in battle. He has a disability, and everybody loves an underdog. I think there's just something about him that's very endearing. Um, when it comes to books that I'm interested in narrating, if I find myself daydreaming about a role, if I were an actual movie actor, what role would I want? And I actually, you'll not believe this, I found myself daydreaming about the role of Fallon's father. That would be such a beautiful part to play in a movie, going to battle, dying, and then Fallon just the whole emotion. You started your book with all this raw emotion, and I think that raw emotion just carries everything forward because you see this hero that not a hero but an underdog who has lost so much, and you can't help but want to see him do well simply because he's lost everything, including his arm getting crushed and being mangled. And if ever if you've seen a dog in the street that was badly beaten, you'd automatically think, well, I'll give him something to eat. So I think there is that magic about the book that he is so behind everybody else, and yet he's there fighting his way forward. There's that beauty of it. And I think that growth of character is just brilliant to watch. With regards to other stories, what stories do you like reading yourself? And I like asking people this because it gives me an insight into their mentality when they're writing. What stories, science fiction, fantasy, whatever, do you like reading, or what authors do you like?
Obviously, some of the influences I have, those ones would be some of my favorites: R.A. Salvatore, Margaret Weis, and Tracy Hickman. And I've met all of them. Yes, I've met Margaret 3 times, book signings and stuff. Tracy, I've met twice. Salvatore, I've met once. And it was the coolest experience because he was at a local bookstore. There wasn't a ton of people who showed up, surprisingly, and the ones that did got their book signed, said hey, and then left.
Yeah.
And so after everyone had went through and got their book signed, there was nobody there. He was just sitting there waiting. And so I got to hang out with him and just chat with him for like 30 minutes. And it was just cool. And we kind of talked about his influences and like who he liked in the genre, who he read, and things like that. And I told him, I was young at the time, I was a teenager, but I was like, I think you're the best in the genre right now. Like, no one can touch what you do. And he goes, no, I disagree. Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, when they're working as a team, he said, no one can touch them. He goes, now separately, I could take them. So it was interesting. But yeah, he's a very humble dude. And it was really cool to just chat with him. And, kind of that whole influence thing is he wrote a series called the Demon War Saga. There's like 6-7 books in that series, and it's very character driven. So there's 2 main characters, and you see them from when they're children and when they grow up. So like you really get attached to these characters and you learn everything about them. And so that's what I like, is character driven stories. Obviously there's things that drive those characters, that maybe world plot, like Sauron, or whatever, Saruman, and things from Lord of the Rings, like the big bad evil in the background. But there's characters and they have everyday lives and normal things that go on in spite of those big world shattering things going on. And so those are the kind of stories I like, character driven, where you get to see inside their head and relate to them and experience their life through their eyes. So that's what I like. So that's what I aimed to do with Dragon Riders.
I think you succeeded when it came to Dragon Riders. It's hard to talk about the books without giving anything away, but obviously at the start in the first book there is a villain coming. Of course, there is a meeting between villains and good guys at some point, but at the main point, I was fascinated by Eldwin and Marin. Marin, I didn't expect. Goodness, I hope it is Marin, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's all right, because quite often I get confused with characters, and I was just thinking I've been recording for 20 minutes here to get the name right. But yes, Marin fascinated me because I didn't see where that was going until a secret was revealed of her backstory. I had no clue. And then it happened, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then I was like, well, should I play her a bit more posh? And I was like, I don't know if I should play her more posh. No, I think I'm right the way I am. She's trying to, I've maybe given away given away a little there, but
No.
there's just so much depth to the characters in the series that reveals itself as you go along. Probably another question people are wondering: the book series is at number 10 at the minute. Is there any plans in the future to expand that?
That's a good question. So when I first realized it was going to be a series, it was only 5 books. It
Yes.
only went to Wings of Terror. And to me, the story was done. And
Yeah.
so I kind of was like, okay, this is the end. And as you go through them all, you will notice that 5 feels like it's a final ending.
Yeah.
Now, I did leave an opening with the intent that if there was enough interest in the series, that I would come back and do some more, because I did have an idea for it. But at that time, there was only 5, and that was the plan. And then I went on to co-write a series with another friend. And while I was co-writing that series, the idea that I had planted for at the end of the 5th book,
Yeah.
kind of just took the front driver's seat of my brain. And that book was number 6, which became Eyes of Stone.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was, but that idea would just not get out of my head. And I was like, all right, I'm co-writing this series with a friend. I was ahead of him because we had kind of like plotted out, the storylines of our characters.
Yeah.
So last year, just to kind of give you a little background, I wrote and published 12 books. So it was crazy. I was a writing machine. I've never been that productive before, and I'm not that productive this year. Not that I'm like not focused or anything, just I had a goal last year, was in my mind, I want to publish 1 book a month. I didn't do 1 book a month, but I did do 12 books. So it kind of worked out, so I still hit my goal. But while I was co-writing that book, the idea for that 6th book, that next part of their journey, just kind of took over. And so I literally wrote book 6 in about, now I'll say 6 days.
Wow.
It wasn't consecutive. That was on the weekends. So
Yeah.
Monday through Friday, I was writing the co-written book. And then when the weekend came, I kind of put that aside and then went back into the Dragon Rider. So yeah, I would write 2 to 3 chapters a day when I was working on that, because it just flowed. The story was like just building up in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So it went quick. And then when I finished it, this happens to me all the time. I'll write something, and while I'm writing it, I'm like, this feels like it sucks. This is crap. This is garbage. And so I'll kind of let it, give it some breathing time. And then when I come back and I read over it, I'm like, actually, this isn't that bad. It's not as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah.
So
Imposter syndrome, probably. I can only commiserate with how difficult it is. Like when I was younger, I wrote books, and looking back at them now, I can see how bad they were. But to get something that does as well as the Dragon Riders of Osnen is, I think sales and reviews themselves are the only consolation you can take against feeling that way. There's no way of knowing who's going to appreciate it or hate it. Goodness knows, when I started narrating audiobooks, I still to this day hate the sound of my voice. I think everybody, if you have a sense of humility, you do.
mm-hmm.
But I've got a career out of it. And so I always have to remind myself, you know what, Andy, you've a career. People like your voice. You're not dung, but there's always that wee monster. And I think that's healthy for a writer and a narrator, that if you have that wee monster, you strive to go forward and to perfect it. So you do. What day are you writing anything at the minute, or can you elaborate on if you're involved in any projects at the minute, or are they secret?
I am working on a new series. Similar. It's gonna be Dragon Riders, but a different take.
Mhm.
It's gonna be a lot different. But if you like Dragon Riders of Osnen, I think you'll like this new series as well. Book one actually went up for pre-order, so it's July 5th. Book
Nice.
one's dropping. Book two is being edited, and I'm working on book three now. So I could tell you a little bit about that, I guess. So it is different in that there are no Dragon Riders currently. So the girl who's the main character, excuse me, thirsty today. The girl who's the main character, she was, as a child, she fell into a dragon's nest, and a loose dragon scale got embedded in her leg. So she all of a sudden has the ability to sense dragons. Now, at the current time where you're introduced to all this stuff, dragons are viewed as mindless animals. They're just another wild animal like anything else. There's nothing magical about them. They don't, they don't speak or anything like that. And that's what she's grown up her whole life believing. And so she feels like she has a curse, and she hates that she can sense dragons. And it kind of ruined her life as a child. So her parents, they're kind of freaked out, and they sell her to the local, I don't want to say king, because there's only one ruler. He's known as the High Prince. But there are other people called Dominion Lords. So when you think of the leader of a kingdom or a country or whatever, it's a Dominion Lord. And so her parents sold her to a Dominion Lord, and he hunts dragons for sport. And so he uses her ability to his benefit. So obviously dragons hoard gold and treasure. So he's increasing his wealth by using her ability. And she doesn't like being a slave, because she's basically a slave to him, and she doesn't like being cursed. She views it as a curse.
Yeah.
So as the book continues, without giving away too much, she learns some things about dragons that go against everything she's ever known.
Yes.
And that curse that she thinks is a curse could potentially turn out to not be a curse. Let's just say that. So, and in the second book, there's a lot more that you learn about the history of dragons and their relationship to humans and things like that. And things are going to get pretty interesting. So I originally planned it to be a trilogy. I'm writing book 3. Yeah, I'm at the beginning of book 3 right now. It is it's gonna be more than 3 books.
Nice. Very good.
Yeah. But I also, to kind of go back to Dragon Riders of Osnen, there is an idea I had, and it's funny, we chat all the time through Messenger, because we just go back and forth and talk about sales and stuff. But the other night, I had this idea, just came to me as I was trying to go to sleep, about something I could do to come back to the world of Osman. And it was the funniest thing. Like a couple of days later, you said, "Hey, have you ever thought about a spin-off series?" And I was like, "Oh my God, this man thinks just like I do."
Yeah.
So, and I was like, actually, I did the other day. I had this idea, and it was kind of similar to what you had, suggested when you were like, "Hey, have you ever considered like a spin-off where maybe it's like an anti-hero?" And I was like, that's exactly the idea I had. So that's just all I have in mind right now. But it is something that intrigues me to move forward with. So
There you go.
We'll see.
Well, that will give the viewers plenty to go on. If you guys want a spin-off series, if you want all 10 episodes, you have to subscribe, hit the notification button, make sure you get the views in. When we reach enough viewers and subscribers, we can monetize the channel, which means it pays for the books, basically. So you
and
subscribe.
It's a benefit to the people listening, because they get to listen for free.
Yeah,
but we'll still get the benefit of earning money for our creation. So
everybody's a winner. So they are. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. This is episode 1 finished. If anybody has any questions and you want another episode, fill in the forms or the comment section below any questions you have. There's obviously going to be things that I haven't asked that are on your guys' minds. Ask them. We'll answer them in another episode if you want. But make sure, hit the subscribe button, watch the videos, and we do plan on, by the grace of God, uploading more episodes, more audiobooks of the Dragon Riders of Osnen in the very near future. Have patience with us. We will get them up for you guys. And everybody gets to be a winner. Okay? Goodbye, guys. All the best.